This week's episode comes from Donald Pee Wee Gaskins, the serial killer, and his autobiography, The Final Truth. Donald Pee Wee Gaskins Jr. was born March 13, 1933, was an American serial killer and rapist from South Carolina who stabbed, shot, drowned and poisoned more than a dozen people. Before his convictions for murder, Gaskins had a long history of criminal activities resulting in prison sentences for assault, burglary and statutory rape. His last arrest was for contributing to the delinquency of a minor, 13-year-old Kim Gaskins, who had gone missing in September 1975. During their search for the missing girl, police discovered 8 bodies buried in shallow graves near Gaskins' home in Prospect, South Carolina. Gaskins was executed on September 6, 1991 at 1:10 a.m. in the electric chair, hours after he tried to kill himself by slitting his wrist. His last words were, "I'll let my lawyers talk for me, I'm ready to go." I did most of what I call my serious murders, the ones where I actually know the people that I killed, in Florence and Sumter counties, South Carolina, the same part of the state where I grew up. It's mainly farms and woods, backwaters and swamps, and little towns with names like Lake City and Johnsonsville, and other spots not hardly big enough to be put on a map. Prospect and Leo and Rogers Crossroads and the Neck. It was a good place to lead my kind of life. There were lots of places to bury bodies. Being born on a farm, I know the difference between raising something and it just growing. You raise tobacco and vegetables to harvest, and the pigs and sheep to butcher. They got purpose. You tend them, but weeds grow on their own, tended or not. I grew. I weren't raised, that's for damn sure. How I didn't know my own real name until I was a teenager, got sentenced to the reformatory. Up until then, at home and at school, my name had always been Junior Parrot, and everybody elsewhere called me Junior or Pee Wee Parrot, which made sense to me because my mama's name was Parrot. As far as I knew, my whole family was named Parrot, except for my stepdaddies. None of them was named Parrot, but then nobody ever has the same name as their stepdaddy. When the judge sentenced me to the reformatory until age 18, he said I was lucky I was a juvenile, otherwise he would have put me away for a really long time for what I'd done. Then he looked at my arrest report and asked why I had my mama's name. Where was my daddy? What was his last name? And Mama didn't lie to him like she did to everybody else. She said I had her name because she'd never married my daddy, and that my true name, as it was written in the family Bible, was Donald Henry Gaskins Jr. For a minute I thought the judge was going to shit right there on the bench. "You sure about that?" he said. My mama said she was real sure. She was 15 when I was born. Donald Henry Gaskins was the only man who'd ever done it to her before she got pregnant with me, and he'd even helped her with support money until she married my stepdaddy. She told me later that the real reason my real daddy had given her money was to keep her quiet about him being my father, but she still believed he would have married her if he hadn't been so well off that his family wouldn't let him. When I was younger, there was always one or another of a bunch of different stepdaddies around. I called them all sir and never bothered to learn most of their names because I knew my mum wasn't married to them. They wouldn't likely be around for long. One she finally did marry was one mean son of a bitch. He used to backhand me and knock me clean across my room just for practice. Then everybody knocked me around. My uncles, my other stepdaddies, and knew about all the boys and girls I played with and went to school with. They beat up on me just because I was so damn little. It weren't that I was the littlest because I was youngest. No matter how old I got, I was still littlest. I never growed enough to keep up with the others. That's how I got the nickname Pee Wee. Pee Wee, Pee Wee, playing with your pee-pee, they used to say. When I got mad and then hit somebody, that was all the excuse they needed to gang up and beat the hell out of me. I was born March 31st, 1933. Most of what I remember from when I was real young is hazy, like trying to see through smoke in the woods, but I do have this here one memory from before I started school that's as clear as yesterday, going to the carnival. Most of my stepdaddies were tight as a preacher's arsehole when it came to money, except for one. The year he lived with my mama, I reckon he had made a good share. It was about 1937, I would guess, and a little carnival had set up along the state highway between Lake City and Johnsonville, and my then stepdaddy decided he was going to see it. I remember him and Mama and me and a girl cousin, who was almost as little as me, walking along a sawdust midway and stopping in front of a tent with paintings of a snake wrapped around a big-titted woman and an alligator swallowing a whole cow. My stepdaddy paid a dime apiece for him and Mama and a nickel each for me and my cousin. Inside the tent, in a wire pen, was this alligator that didn't look very big to me, even then, and inside of glass-front cages there were bunches of snakes, all balled up, sleeping, I guessed. The man who took our money outside followed us in and talked us through a megaphone, which he didn't hardly need because there weren't nobody else there but us. He was a barker, I learned later, when I worked carnivals. And I remember him saying something like, "Ladies and gentlemen, let me direct your attention to the centre of the tent. The snake lying inside that cage may look peaceful, but don't be fooled. You are looking at the most dangerous creature on God's earth. That is the fearsome king cobra, and each year kills hundreds, some year thousands of men, women and children in India." Then the barker stopped talking, took a live rat out of a box and dropped it in the cage of the snake. That rat ran around and around real fast. The cobra stirred and coiled up, rose up and flared out its neck, and the rat stopped, froze like it thought that if it stayed still it might turn invisible. What took hold of my attention right then was that the cobra's head was almost exactly as high up as my head. When I looked through the glass, I was staring it straight in the eye. My reflection looked like the cobra, and me and him had the same face and eyes. This one was fed last night. That bulge halfway down its length is the supper it's still digesting. So let me assure you, this snake is not hungry. And as you no doubt noticed when you walked up to its cage, the cobra didn't get upset. It just lay there. That's because it's used to people and knew it didn't need to defend itself. But now, suddenly it's raised itself up and is about ready to strike. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is what makes the cobra the most dangerous of all reptiles. The fact that even as we watch it, it's preparing to kill for no reason other than the fact that it has decided to kill. The snake struck, then stretched out and went back to sleep. The rat didn't move. I looked at my reflection, then at the cobra, and I turned and saw my girl cousin holding tight to my mama's leg. I looked up at my mama, my stepdaddy's faces, and saw that they seemed pretty scared too. I had a hard on. I knew that what I'd just seen was somehow special and important, even though I didn't know why. I still carry that memory, clear as a picture etched on my brain. Nothing they can do can ever burn it away. But I can't say there was much else about them years spent growing up on a tobacco farm outside of Leo, South Carolina. It was worth remembering. To me, school was more than just a waste. It was a kind of torture. Everybody picked on me, so I got into fights almost every day. Then I got punished by the teachers and principal for fighting. It's no wonder I never learned jack shit. About the onlyest thing that truly interested me when I was a boy, and still does, was figuring out what made things work, especially cars and things electric like radios. I was a pretty good tinkerer by the time I was 10. That Pee Wee can fix anything, Mum used to say. Even my stepdaddy admitted I was a pretty good car mechanic. Before I was 10, I was hanging around the mechanics at the filling station a few miles down the highway. When I was 11, I was laying out of school about half the time, making $1 or $2 a day helping tote and French and do. When I up and quit school, my mum was really unhappy. My stepdaddy said that if I weren't going to school, I had to work in the fields and no more chores. I said I wanted to work on cars, not on a farm, but he beat my ass so bad every time I slipped off to work for the mechanic that I decided it was best just to do what he wanted. And after a while, thanks to my mama, he agreed that on Saturdays I could go work at the station. Not far from where we lived, there was this old house that had been empty for years. Most Sunday afternoons, and any other time I could, I went there to meet up with other boys from around Leo. We called it our hideout. We sat around and smoked cigarettes, we had stole and bragged about how much we knew about girls, and we watched the older boys and learned how to jerk off or cornhole or fuck a sheep or a goat or chicken, and we usually ended up fighting about something. I remember that the worst whipping I ever got was the time me and two older boys dug a trench back at the outhouse of the church so we could hide there and watch the women and girls when they pulled down their pants. 3 sets of stepdaddies, a preacher, a deacon and 4 mamas, including my mama, joined together and tore our asses to ribbons with switches for that. Even back then, girls pissed me off. The way I saw it, they had something boys wanted, but wouldn't even let a boy look at it, much less fuck it, unless the boy did whatever the girl wanted. Especially made me mad that them bitches could do anything they wanted, show their asses, make fun of me, even beat me up, and dare me to do anything about it, knowing I could do nothing without being punished by grown-ups. But don't get me wrong, my childhood weren't all that bad, all the time. I certainly weren't in nowhere what you could ever call abused. Final truth is, for the most part, my family life was pretty good. I had 2 sisters and 2 brothers. I reckon half-sisters and half-brothers is more correct. They were all a lot younger than me, because they wasn't born until after I started school. My mama finally married my legal stepdaddy. Him and Hannah, who was truly mean as hell and is dead now, so he's one of my half-brothers. My mum was a real good cook, and we always had enough to eat. Most days, after I'd quit going to school, I did my chores and minded my manners and stayed out of trouble. My brothers and sisters did their chores and didn't mess with me. They were even nice to me sometimes, usually when something of theirs was broken and they wanted me to fix it. I had a good little business going. On Saturdays, people bought broken radios and record players and sewing machines and things like that to the gas station, and I took them home and repaired them in the evenings. I worked in a corner of the parlour room, which was also where me and my brother slept. The whole family sat in there after supper, because that was where the radio was. We listened to The Shadow and The Lone Ranger and The Grand Ole Opry and all kinds of good programmes like that. Mama was most always sewing, while my stepdaddy smoked his pipe and sipped corn and talked back to the radio, and my sisters and brothers played and teased. Remember my house and my family usually being like that, good and peaceful. No matter how things went, good or bad, I always felt something bothersome was stirring inside me. It was like I had this ball of plumber's lead rolling around in my guts. Most time it lay quiet, just weighing me down. Other times it growed bigger and hotter, like it was going to explode. Every once in a while I dreamed, I still do, that it blowed me apart and there was all these millions of little pieces and parts of me running around, flying around, trying to find each other and put me back together. That's all for tonight. Night night, sleep tight. Don't let the bed bugs bite.